Perfect. So hi everyone, yeah, thank you so much for coming today. I guess the first thing I'm going to have to do is reassure you that despite the title, this is actually an interesting talk. I think it's a fair assumption to say that most of you probably don't go about your daily life thinking about batteries or energy storage all that much. And I know certainly I didn't when I started this. I was actually looking at public transport and how we could kind of change our way of looking around moving in and around cities and moving away from these non-renewable sources. And actually the key technology we really had to work on was batteries. And then when you look at batteries as a whole, there's so much more that they can be used to really help us move into a carbon neutral, renewable future. So the first important thing to look at is, why do we actually need batteries? So the important thing really, especially for climate change, is emission reduction. So I'm sure you're all aware of like Teslas and stuff like that, electric cars. These are really quite key in our renewable revolution. So for electric vehicles, for example, for Teslas, I think about 30% of Europe's emissions were road vehicles. So if we can start moving towards these kind of battery powered cars, we would actually be able to then move towards a cleaner version of all of that. But the problem is then, do they charge from renewable grid energy or do they charge from non-renewable coal plants? So what we actually need as well is battery solutions for the grid. At the moment, the way grid energy works is kind of shown on the right here, where we have a baseload energy that we always have to meet, where that's used for street lights and hospitals and, you know, the plugs in our walls. And we need to make sure this is actually hit. So to do that, we currently use coal plants and oil plants and, you know, natural gas, because these are really quite reliable. Whereas renewable sources, in contrast, are really, really variable. So what we need is battery technology to help us regulate this output and really help us make sure we always reach this baseload. As well as kind of all of this, one important factor is, with every technology comes new possibilities, new capabilities, things we weren't able to do before. As well as that, there's increased safety, which is a big problem that we face with a lot of our energy today. So what we actually have today, one of the big problems, is lithium-ion batteries. So the way these work, to keep it quite simple, is two metal plates, an anode and a cathode, and a liquid electrolyte in the middle that allows the charge to pass. So the way we're going to talk about all these technologies is with pros and cons, so we can see where they fit into the world. So the pros of lithium really are that they're made today. They work today. We all know them. They're in our phones. They're in our cars. They're really quite great. They are very flexible. As I said, phones to cars. We can see there in the bottom right, I've got a diagram of how they put the batteries into a Tesla Model S. And as well as that, these batteries have been around for quite a bit of time. So we've had the time to really develop their efficiency and get them really quite high. This term round trip efficiency, we'll use it quite a lot. It just means what percentage of the energy we put into a battery do we then get back out. The real problems with lithium start coming with the way we have to use them. So we can see there on the bottom right, if we want a big lithium battery, we actually need to stack together lots of smaller batteries. The problem then with that is, if one of these batteries starts getting really hot, the ones around it will also get hot and just end up feeding back into it, ending up in a kind of thermal runaway problem where they exponentially get hotter and hotter and hotter. And then the problem is then, when it burns, the electrolyte in these batteries is really flammable and very toxic. And with lithium burning, especially, it creates its own oxidizer. So the fire is essentially fueling itself, which is a huge problem. There's been a couple of notable big lithium fires in the world. As well as that, there's some problems with the batteries degrading over time. I'm sure you know in your phone, after a year or two, that the batteries become less and less effective as you use it more and more often. And then beyond that, the batteries are just too heavy to be used in, you know, larger vehicles, so buses and trains, or, you know, an aircraft or anything like that. So now that I've bummed you out and I've taken you down the really depressing all the problems of today route, we're going to start looking at the kind of positive. What can we do? What's the future? So what we need solutions for are large-scale citywide energy storage to kind of regulate the renewable generation. We then need some solutions for large vehicles, so like buses, our public transport, and aircraft, that sort of thing. And then we need to look at what improvements we can make for personal vehicles and make sure that they're cheaper and reliable and far safer. So to start big, and then we'll work our way small, we're going to look at redox flow batteries first. These are essentially just two big tanks of liquid. And they are working today. You can see these in Dalian in China. They're making more in Shanghai. And there's a couple that have been running since 2015 in Hokkaido in Japan. And these are really easily scalable, unlike lithium. So if you want to store more charge, you can just build bigger tanks or more of these large kind of facilities. They're a lot safer than lithium as well. Even though the analyte and the catholyte are still toxic, I wouldn't drink them. They're not flammable, so you get that real big boost in safety. Beyond that as well, we get the kind of the recyclable side where the metals used inside do require heavy mining, but we can recycle what's in it and help give the battery second life, as well as the battery lasting longer than lithium, so there's a lot less waste generated. As well as this, it works in high and low temperatures. So with lithium, we need to be really careful with our temperature regulation to prevent fires, whereas redox flow batteries can kind of work wherever, which really helps us tackle the global problem of climate change as a global community, make sure everyone has at least the ability to. These aren't perfect, obviously, nothing I talk about will be. These do have a lower efficiency than lithium, which interestingly means just that little 10% makes redox flow batteries more expensive to run in the short term. Over long term, you don't have to replace them or maintain them as much, but that short term cost makes them quite a difficult sell for smaller governments, for councils, that sort of thing. As well as that, these are very much exclusively for the grid. They are very heavy batteries. We are definitely not putting any of these on aircraft. So then to kind of move on then from this to something maybe a bit more science fiction sounding is the hydrogen fuel cell. The way these work is really, really quite cool, where we use electricity, preferably generated by renewable sources, to split the hydrogen and oxygen in water. We can then move the hydrogen around through pipelines or trucks or any other kind of conventional means of transport, and then reintroduce it to oxygen in a hydrogen generator. This will then combine and release the electricity again and give us some water as a byproduct. So we don't even have fumes to worry about. And the really great thing about this is the flexibility. No matter what the hydrogen is used for, it's the same hydrogen, whether we put it in a huge citywide generator or a small remote village using a small hydrogen generator, or, in a bus like the one I've shown there from Aberdeen. It's really flexible. And as far as energy is concerned, flexibility is king. And it's as well, unlike most of the other technologies, really, really well suited for large vehicles and aircraft. One of the studies I saw showed about by 2050, we might expect almost 40% of Europe's aviation fleet to be hydrogen, which is really quite exciting. The big cons with hydrogen really just come down to infrastructure. It comes down to making it cost effective, making it a competitive source. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem where it's difficult to, no one wants to build the infrastructure and take on the high cost before anyone's actually going to be buying any of the hydrogen. And no one wants to use any hydrogen vehicles until the actual fuel source itself is, competitive, is cheap enough. So there's a lot of problems with infrastructure, and we'll see on the next slide, I've got a great graph that kind of showcases how this is a problem. The other real issue for hydrogen is its low efficiency. So part of this is to do with the infrastructure problem, but there's a lot more work needs to be done to make hydrogen a worthwhile source of energy. So here, this is from an excellent paper, makes for a great Sunday afternoon reading, I promise, all about the future of the hydrogen economy. And this is the Valley of Death, which is any real company or any country that wants to invest in hydrogen is going to have about 10 to 15 years of almost nothing but loss. And after that, everyone benefits. So it's a really good ecosystem of economics. But before then, it's a huge cost. The way some countries like Germany are really leading against this is to start in public transport, kind of like we are here in Scotland, where buses and trains all refuel at the same central points, and then expanding out into urban centres so that people using cities and highways have access to hydrogen fuel, and then expanding further out into suburbia and then into more rural areas until eventually it's more or less the sole fuel source, or at least that's the plan of the German government. But this isn't the perfect solution. Hydrogen's amazing. It's really cool, but we can't use hydrogen in a phone. So to look at kind of the future of our small scale solutions and what we can use for personal vehicles, we need to look at solid state batteries, which are kind of like the eventual successor of lithium ion. So the only real difference between this and a conventional lithium ion battery is the solid electrolyte in the middle, which might seem like a smallish kind of change, but actually some of the chemical changes in that are really, really good. So one is it works at a huge variety of temperatures, as we said. That was a problem before. So that really helps with the safety in electric vehicles. They're a lot smaller as well, which for the climate is a nice plus, but not too important. For tech like medical technology, it's really, really important and really, really good. The other thing as well is there's a lot of research to show that these will charge really, really quickly for really, really high capacity. Some of the headlines I saw were like 500-mile car on a single charge, or your phone lasting 5 days on a minute. The problem is with that, if you look at the actual papers, it does kind of back them up, but these are the highest estimates with like the highest uncertainties. So whenever you see a headline, always treat it with a little bit of skepticism. The real problem with solid state is that it just can't quite be cost effective for large scale. At least that's not how it's looking at the moment. So a lot of work needs to be done on trying that, but with other solutions that do exist, chances are, I'd imagine solid state will stay relatively small scale. The other problem is solid state batteries are very much still in the research prototype stage. Toyota were meant to release a kind of prototype solid state battery car in the Tokyo Summer Olympic Games. For reasons I'm sure we're all far, far, far too aware of, we might have to wait just a little bit longer for that. So now we've kind of looked at all the batteries I wanted to talk about. Let's just zoom out again and think about the original problems I brought up. So as far as the large scale solutions go, really redox flow batteries, be it vanadium or organic, which is an option the EU is trying to fund a lot of right now, they'll be really great because they can be plugged into the energy grid as is already. Hydrogen batteries as well would be amazing for large scale storage, but that infrastructure problem really hits when other batteries do have the advantage. We might still see as well, on large scales, lithium arrays, but I think they will gradually over time become less popular. For large vehicles and aviation, hydrogen really is king here, especially because these are usually vehicles where the infrastructure problem isn't quite as difficult. So this really helps hydrogen in that sense. And it's not got the same weight problems associated with redox flow batteries or lithium ion. As well as that, on the medium kind of scale of vehicles, we might see lithium ion solid state batteries kind of coming in and pulling up some of it. And then on the personal vehicle scale, I think lithium ion and solid state are definitely going to be there. They have the industry, they have the infrastructure, which really helps. It's a lot easier to change the existing gigafactories for Tesla to make it solid state batteries than it is to build whole new factories and whole new pipelines for hydrogen. So now we've kind of looked at that, I guess. Thank you very much for your time and listening. Does anyone have any questions? I'll do my best.